Open world in Diablo IV is relevant from level 1 through level 50. After that, it's just an obstacle between the player and the content they want to reach. This statement may sound completely ridiculous, or be spot on depending on the type of the player you are. If you're more of a completionist, or a player that enjoys a game at slower pace, Diablo 4's world may be all that you want. On the other hand, if you have more of a transactional relationship with the game, meaning you're progressing faster and paying more attention to build optimization, you may have recognized a certain pattern past level 70. This pattern and the way open worlds are structured in video games has gone from something exciting that offers exploration, adventure, immersion, and sense of belonging to a place that serves as a checklist for all the chores players have to complete before they reach the content they want to complete. Raid 5 outposts to lower enemies' influence so that you can fight them. This might be a naive look, but in my opinion, players should want and not have to explore the world. One game that I believe achieved this in recent years is Elden Ring. Elden Ring's open world has power checkpoints as well, but the way they let player interact with these checks is different. Rather than preventing the player from interacting with the next boss, gating it behind artificial pre-requirements, they fully let you do whatever you want and have you figure it out. Once you attempt a boss kill with no items and get destroyed, the game does set a pre-requirement for that part of the content, but it also gives you freedom to approach that pre-requirement whatever way you want. And in this way, open world becomes a place of wonder and exploration rather than on-rails experience. Even though I'm going to mostly argue for the uselessness of open world in Diablo 4, I still believe it plays an important part in two things: delivering the story and immersing the player into the environment by giving it a sense of connectedness rather than partitioned instances that somehow lead from one to another. D4's open world does a pretty decent job in carrying player through the campaign, giving the sense of progression through the story. Player starts in a cave, reaches a small village impacted by demon influence, moves on to a big city from where the story branches into different directions, eventually bringing you to a different region with different climate and feel of the place, further pushing the player to hell where they face the final boss. In this sense, open world is a pretty good vessel for story delivery. Not only is the state of the world expressed through characters and their stories, but through the environment as well. However, once the story reaches its end, what is this huge space left with? Some might say there are world events. You got world bosses, legion events, and hell tides. This sounds like a decent argument, but when we look deeper into these, we see that they pretty much boil down to a couple of actions encased in an instance. Let's take World Boss event as an example. This is how my experience with this event and pretty much every other event looks like. Open the map, pinpoint the event, find the closest waypoint, teleport, run to the event, do it, and TP back to town. In none of these steps does open world play a critical role. It even creates friction in player experience, mostly due to clunky mount system, but that's a different story. Others may mention discovering Lilith statues, farming mandatory renown once per season, but those seem to fall into chore checklist category as they are just means to additional paragon points or skill points. It is also understandable that open world is in this state in season 0 of the game, since the game's content still has a long way to go. I do believe that upcoming seasons will utilize open world more, however, I'm also concerned about its viability due to the fact that the dev team has already announced mechanisms to completely avoid it. Nightmare dungeon sigils will allow players to TP right in front of the dungeon. This system could completely invalidate open world because there are no points of interest on the map that are more desirable, at least in endgame, than nightmare dungeons. World bosses are melted in a couple of minutes, legion events do give decent amount of experience for the effort put in, and hell tides can be very lackluster with monster density issues. On the other hand, adding mechanics to avoid open world might inadvertently influence mount system in a negative way. If there's a way to reach most of points of interest via TP, mounts might solely end up as hell tide transportation system. Though I don't think I have a strong argument here because there's no way Blizzard will let mounts, and more specifically mount cosmetics, become useless. To further shrink the relevancy of open world in Diablo 4, players will even be able to avoid its biggest positive, which I argued for earlier: story delivery. As we know, once the campaign is completed on one character, you will never have to complete it again. Even if this wasn't the case, how much heavy lifting can a world do when delivering the same story over and over again? I do like Blizzard's attempt at this, bringing some sort of MMO light into ARPGs, and I do hope that seasonal content will elevate open world of Sanctuary to a whole new level.